When people think of Ford in the muscle car era, images of the Mustang, Torino, and Cobra flash to mind. But Ford's history isn't just about the iconic names that conquered the streets. It's also about a series of extreme, high-powered experiments that the company quietly buried. These were cars with insane engines, futuristic designs, and sometimes reckless performance. They were built to thrill. But for reasons ranging from safety concerns to marketing misfires, Ford pulled them from the spotlight. Here are 8 super muscle cars that existed briefly before disappearing forever.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 8. The 1965 Ford Thunderbird Sports Roadster II remains one of the most fascinating and forgotten what-ifs in American automotive history. A project that dared to blend luxury and raw muscle at a time when Ford's executives couldn't decide whether their flagship coupe should coddle or excite its drivers. By the mid-1960s, the Thunderbird had undergone a dramatic transformation. What started in 1955 as a nimble personal sports car, a glamorous answer to the Corvette, had evolved into a personal luxury cruiser by 1965. Ford executives proudly touted it as a gentleman's express, emphasizing comfort, power steering, plush interiors, and a smooth ride. But not everyone in Dearborn agreed. A small, rebellious faction inside Ford wanted to give the Thunderbird some of its old fire back. They envisioned a Thunderbird that could rival a Corvette in performance, but with the elegance and prestige that only a Ford flagship could provide. This dream became the Sports Roadster II project. The original Thunderbird Sports Roadster, produced from 1962 to 1963, had been a styling exercise. A convertible with wire wheels, a fiberglass tonneau cover, and sporty flair. But it wasn't a true performance car. By contrast, the Sports Roadster II was something entirely different, an experimental coupe designed in 1965 to marry luxury with brute power. Engineers reportedly fitted the car with Ford's legendary 427 cubic-inch engine, the same engine that powered the Le Mans-winning GT40s and the NASCAR Galaxies. This was not a car for country club cruises. This was a Thunderbird that could shred tires and challenge America's top muscle cars. Even more audacious, it came with a 4-speed manual transmission, a feature completely out of place in a luxury coupe that typically came with a smooth automatic. The project's philosophy could be summed up simply. What if the Thunderbird wasn't just beautiful, but brutal? Unfortunately, when the prototype reached Ford's executive board, the reaction was immediate and cold. Executives, including Lee Iacocca, who was steering the company's image towards sophistication and mass appeal, hated the idea. The thought of a rich man's hot rod clashed with Ford's carefully curated luxury narrative. They feared it would confuse the market. A Thunderbird with a 427 and manual gearbox would scare off their target buyers, businessmen, professionals, and suburban elites who wanted prestige, not performance headaches. One Ford insider allegedly remarked, "Thunderbird owners don't want to shift gears, they want to show off." The Sports Roadster II was quietly canceled before production even began. The prototype was locked away, and most records of the project were buried in Ford's archives. In hindsight, the 1965 Ford Thunderbird Sports Roadster II could have been a bridge between two eras, the fading glamour of the early Thunderbird and the rising power of Ford's muscle car lineup. Imagine if it had gone into production, A 427-powered Thunderbird with hand-built luxury touches could have rivaled the likes of the Buick Riviera GS or the Chrysler 300 Letter series, cars that managed to combine refinement with raw strength. Instead, the Thunderbird would continue down its plush, heavy path, eventually becoming a symbol of American excess rather than performance. Few photos or detailed technical records of the Sports Roadster 2 survive today, but it remains a legend among Ford historians, proof that even within the conservative corridors of Ford's headquarters, there were dreamers who wanted to push boundaries. The Sports Roadster 2 represented a bold question that Ford never dared to answer. Could the Thunderbird have been both a gentleman's coupe and a street predator? The 1965 Ford Thunderbird Sports Roadster 2 stands as a fascinating ghost, a vision of what might have been if Ford had embraced performance over prestige. It was a car that challenged the very definition of what a Thunderbird could be, and for that reason alone, it remains one of the most intriguing, lost legends of American automotive history. A Thunderbird that could have roared, but was told to stay silent. Number 7. The 1960 Ford Starliner 406 prototype represents one of the most intriguing crossroads in early American performance history. A moment when Ford stood on the edge of creating a true factory-built muscle car 5 years before the muscle car era officially began. Sleek, slippery, and secretly powerful, the Starliner 406 was an experiment in marrying Ford's new obsession with aerodynamics to the emerging culture of high-horsepower street performance. But like many ambitious ideas from that period, it never made it to the showroom floor. The Ford Starliner debuted in 1960 as a high-style, full-size hardtop coupe. Built on the Galaxie platform, it was designed for aerodynamic efficiency, a rare focus for an American automaker at the time. Its flowing roofline, thin pillars, and wraparound glass were directly inspired by jet-age aircraft design and NASCAR competition needs. At a time when most American coupes were tall, boxy, and chrome-heavy, the Starliner looked sleek, futuristic, and fast even while parked. Ford's engineers and stylists saw in it not just a pretty body, but an opportunity. What if this graceful shape could also serve as the foundation for a true performance machine? By late 1959, Ford's engineering division was already experimenting with larger displacement engines. The 390 V8 had been introduced for the 1961 model year, but in the back rooms of Dearborn, a pre-production 406 cubic inch V8 was being developed, a borne-out, strengthened evolution of the FE Ford Edsel engine family. This early version of the 406 was said to produce over 400 horsepower, an astounding figure for 1960. Engineers paired it with a 4-barrel carburetor setup, heavy-duty internals, and optional 3x2 or tri-power carburation for testing. To test its aerodynamic and performance capabilities, Ford fitted the prototype 406 into a Starliner body, a car already proven to slice through air better than its competitors in stock car testing. The result was a factory-built performance monster that could have challenged Chrysler's 413 Cross-Ram engines years before the Mopar Max Wedge era even began. Had it reached production, the Starliner 406 might have rewritten American performance history. Its combination of size, power, and sleek looks could have positioned Ford as the early leader in the performance coupe market, predating the Pontiac GTO by several years. But the prototype remained just that, a prototype. The Starliner's light construction and slippery design made it a handful to control at high speeds. With over 400 horsepower and drum brakes, Ford's engineers worried about stability and driver safety, especially on public roads. A few internal tests reportedly ended with scary handling moments at triple-digit speeds. Regulatory and image fears. In 1960, automakers were under growing pressure to appear responsible and family-oriented. High-horsepower street racers were seen as dangerous publicity risks. Ford's management decided that a production Starliner 406 would be too wild for their customer base and too controversial for their image. Additionally, early concerns about emission standards were already surfacing, leading Ford to shelf the high-output 406 until 1962. As a result, the 1960 Starliner 406 project was quietly terminated, and the test vehicles were dismantled or repurposed for other engineering studies. While the 1960 prototype never made production, its legacy lived on in the 1962-63 Galaxie 406 models. These cars carried the spirit and much of the hardware first developed for the Starliner test mules. The production 406 V8 made 385 to 405 horsepower, depending on carburation, and became a legend in NASCAR, powering Ford's full-size racers to victory against Chevrolet and Dodge. The Starliner's body shape also directly influenced Ford's continued focus on aerodynamics, paving the way for the 1963.5 Fastback Galaxies, cars that dominated the high-speed ovals. In a sense, the 1960 Starliner 406 was a blueprint for the performance revolution Ford would fully embrace a few years later with cars like the Fairlane Thunderbolt and the Mustang GT. The 1960 Ford Starliner 406 prototype remains a symbol of Ford's hidden ambition during a conservative era. It proved that engineers were already dreaming of cars that were more than just transportation. They were machines designed to thrill, compete, and dominate. Although the project was never officially documented for public release, automotive historians and collectors continue to debate its existence. A few insider accounts, test reports, and factory photos suggest that at least one running prototype existed, used internally for performance testing, and possibly destroyed by 1962. Today, the Starliner's name has become legendary among enthusiasts who admire its design purity and aerodynamic form. Combined with the mystique of the unreleased 406 prototype, it stands as one of Ford's greatest what-ifs. The 1960 Ford Starliner 406 prototype was more than a car. It was a glimpse into the future of American performance. It represented the untold chapter between Ford's early luxury coupes and its later muscle icons. Had it reached production, it might have earned the title of America's first true muscle coupe, redefining the decade's performance narrative. Instead, it was locked away, a victim of corporate fear and changing times. Yet even in silence, it whispered a powerful truth. Sometimes the best cars are the ones that never get built. Number 6. The 1961 Ford Galaxie Lightweight 427 concept stands as one of the most thrilling and most forbidden chapters in Ford's performance history. Conceived in secrecy and built with experimental materials, it was a no-compromise drag racing weapon that blurred the line between factory prototype and outlaw machine. It was a car so brutally fast, so purpose-built, that Ford's own lawyers banned it from street use. This was not just a concept, it was a warning shot that Ford was about to take racing very seriously. By the dawn of the 1960s, Ford Motor Company was waking up to a harsh reality. Chevrolet and Chrysler were dominating American motorsports. The Chevy 409 and Chrysler's Ram Chargers were cleaning up on drag strips and stock car tracks, giving their brand serious performance credibility. Ford, known more for family sedans and conservative styling, needed to fight back. The answer would come from within. Ford's Special Vehicle Operations engineers, a shadowy group of mechanics, racers, and engineers, began quietly developing lightweight, high-horsepower versions of the company's full-size cars. Their mission was simple: build something that could win. The 1961 Galaxie was chosen as the test platform. It was Ford's full-size flagship coupe, stylish but heavy. Engineers at Ford's experimental garage in Dearborn decided to see how light they could make it and how fast it could go with a prototype high-displacement FE engine. Using techniques borrowed from aircraft construction and racing, they replaced steel body panels, hood, trunk lid, and front fenders with aluminum, used fiberglass hoods and bumpers in some test mules, stripped interiors of insulation, sound deadening, and comfort features, installed plexiglass windows on some examples to further reduce weight. The result was a Galaxie that weighed nearly 500 pounds less than stock, yet still looked showroom ready. Under the hood, the lightweight Galaxie received a prototype version of Ford's upcoming 427 FE V8, still in early experimental form in 1961. This massive engine was based on the 390 and 46 FE blocks, but featured a larger bore and reinforced internals for high RPM racing use. Output varied depending on carburation setup, but insiders claimed the engine could produce up to 450 horsepower, a staggering figure for 1961. Coupled with Ford's new aluminum intake manifold, headers, and 4-speed manual gearbox, the Galaxie Lightweight became a true quarter-mile missile. Unofficial tests from Ford engineers reportedly clocked quarter-mile times in the low 12s, and some whispered it could break into the 11s with tuning. Phenomenal for a full-size car in the early 1960s. But success came at a cost. The Galaxie Lightweight 427 was too wild for Ford's public image. The car wasn't a comfortable cruiser, it was a purpose-built racer wearing a street-legal disguise. During internal discussions, Ford's legal department raised several red flags. The car's lack of safety equipment, thin body panels, lightweight glass, and limited crash protection. The unofficial nature of its modifications, which could not meet production standards. The fear that if a customer or tester were injured driving one, Ford would face serious legal and public relations backlash. As a result, the project was quietly halted before public release. Ford's lawyers reportedly declared the car unsuitable for public sale or registration. Only a small handful of prototypes, believed to be fewer than 5, were built, all used internally or loaned to select race teams for development. Even though the 1961 Galaxie Lightweight 427 never reached production, it laid the groundwork for Ford's factory drag racing dominance in the years that followed. It directly inspired the 1962 Galaxie 406 Lightweight, which was sold to select racers through Ford's Superstock program. The 1963 Galaxie 427 Lightweight, with the official aluminum and fiberglass panels, and the legendary dual-quad 425 horsepower 427 engine. Eventually, the 1964 Fairlane Thunderbolt, Ford's most famous factory drag car, a direct descendant of the 1961 concept. In other words, the 1961 lightweight 427 concept was the missing link between Ford's early experimental racers and the full-blown, race-ready production drag cars that followed. The 1961 Galaxie Lightweight 427 concept was also an engineering laboratory on wheels. Ford's experimentation with aluminum body panels, composite hoods, and weight reduction techniques would influence its future NASCAR and NHRA programs. Very few original components from these prototypes survived. Most cars were dismantled after testing or destroyed by Ford's engineering department to keep trade secrets hidden. Surviving documentation is scarce, but a few photographs and internal memos confirmed the existence of the cars and their testing at Ford's Dearborn and Romeo proving grounds. The 1961 Ford Galaxie Lightweight 427 concept remains one of Ford's most fascinating ghost projects, a car that promised greatness but was buried by corporate caution. It symbolized a tension that defined early 1960s. Engineers wanted to build pure performance machines, while executives and lawyers feared the legal and image consequences. Had Ford greenlit it, the Galaxie 427 might have become the first true factory-built American drag car, preceding Chrysler's Max Wedge Dodges and Plymouths. Instead, it became a legend whispered among racers, a car that existed for a moment and then vanished into the shadows. The 1961 Ford Galaxie Lightweight 427 concept wasn't built to impress the public, it was built to terrify the competition. It marked the beginning of Ford's relentless pursuit of racing glory and its eventual dominance on the drag strip. Although the lawyers shut it down, its influence roared on in every 427 Fairlane, every Thunderbolt, every Cobra jet that followed. It was the car that proved Ford had the power and the courage to build something extraordinary, even if the world wasn't ready for it yet. Too fast for the streets, too dangerous for the showrooms, too important to forget. Number 5. The 1964 Ford Mustang 427 Experimental, often nicknamed Mustero, a blend of Mustang and Roadster, represents one of the wildest and least known moments in Ford's early performance history. Long before the Mustang became a cultural icon of accessible performance, Ford engineers and racing insiders were already pushing the pony car to extremes. The Mustero was one of those extremes, a car that answered a question nobody asked. What happens if you stuff a full racing spec 427 into a compact Mustang shell? The answer was chaos, tire smoke, and a stern memo from Ford's legal department. The Mustang debuted in April 1964 to enormous fanfare. Ford's marketing called it a car for everyone, affordable, stylish, and sporty. It was meant for the masses, not for professional racers. But inside Ford's Dearborn engineering labs and among the drag racing community, there was already a different vision. What if this new compact coupe could also be a monster on the strip? In the early 1960s, Ford had just unleashed its FE Series big blocks in Galaxies and Fairlines. Engines like the 406 and 427 High-Riser were tearing up drag strips and NASCAR tracks. The idea to drop that same 427 into Ford's newest, lightest platform was irresistible to a few bold engineers. Thus was born the Mustang 427 Experimental, codename Mustero. The Mustero was not an official production car. It was a one-off engineering prototype, rumored to have been assembled jointly by Ford's Special Vehicle Division and a California-based performance shop that worked with Ford Racing. The car began life as a 1964.5 Mustang hardtop stripped down to the bare essentials. Engineers then shoehorned in the 427 cubic inch FE High-Riser V8, the same power plant used in Ford's NASCAR and drag racing Galaxies. This was a full competition engine, not a mild street version. To make it fit, the team had to modify the engine bay and front subframe for clearance, reinforce the front suspension and frame rails to support the massive torque, upgrade the rear axle and driveline to handle the violent launches, fit manual steering and manual brakes because the power systems couldn't cope with the engine's demands. In essence, they built a drag car wearing a Mustang skin. The 427 High-Riser engine was rated at 425 horsepower, but real output was closer to 475 to 500 HP in racing trim. This was in a car that weighed barely 3,000 pounds. The result? ferocious acceleration, and absolutely terrifying handling. 0 to 60 miles per hour estimated under 5 seconds with slicks. Quarter mile, roughly 12.2 seconds at 115 miles per hour, unofficial drag strip tests. Top speed near 140 miles per hour, if you dared to keep it straight that long. But while the Mustero was blisteringly fast in a straight line, it was completely uncontrollable elsewhere. The Mustang's narrow track width, light rear end, and basic suspension could not manage the violent torque. Testers reported brutal wheel hop, axle twist, and loss of steering control above 80 miles per hour. One engineer reportedly quipped, "It went straight for about 2 seconds, then tried to kill you." When Ford executives and safety officials saw the test results, they shut the project down almost immediately. The car violated everything the production Mustang was supposed to stand for: affordability, practicality, and safety. 3 key issues killed the program. Handling. The chassis could not support 500 horsepower. Reinforcements would have made the car too heavy and expensive. Heat and vibration. The 427 generated massive engine bay heat, warping components and cooking wiring harnesses. Corporate liability. After Ford's legal team reviewed internal test data, including one near crash, they concluded the car was unfit for public sale or use. The prototype was reportedly crated and hidden within Ford's engineering storage facility. Some accounts suggest it was later scrapped. Others say it was quietly sold to a private collector under strict conditions. The name Mustero appeared in whispers and old dealer documents, though it wasn't Ford's official code. The term was borrowed later by enthusiasts, possibly inspired by Ford's brief 1966 Mustang Ranchero conversion project, which also used the nickname Mustero. However, the 1964 427 Mustero was an entirely different beast, not a Ranchero-style pickup, but a bare-knuckle performance prototype meant to test how far the Mustang's body could be pushed before it broke. And it broke! While the 427 Mustero never reached production, it played a key role in Ford's understanding of power-to-weight engineering. The lessons learned from this car directly influenced the development of the 1965 Shelby GT350, which used the lighter and more manageable 289 V8. The 1966 Fairlane GT427, which used a reinforced midsize frame. The 1969 Boss 429 Mustang, where Ford finally engineered a big block Mustang properly, after years of trial, error, and bruised egos. In essence, the Mustero taught Ford that raw horsepower means nothing without control. It was the perfect example of early 1960s American excess, building power first and asking questions later. Only 1 or 2 Mustang 427 experimentals are believed to have been built in 1964, both for testing and demonstration. Neither survived in public view, and Ford has never officially confirmed their VINs. But period photos and engineering notes verify that such a prototype existed. It appeared briefly in Dearborn Proving Ground records under an internal classification, FE High-Riser Mustang Test Car. Enthusiasts and historians still debate whether the Mustero was meant as a publicity stunt, a serious drag project, or simply a mechanical experiment. Whatever the truth, it showcased a side of Ford few ever saw, the side that dreamed of unleashing pure racing power in the hands of everyday drivers. The 1964 Ford Mustang 427 Experimental, Mustero, was a paradox. Too powerful to ignore, too dangerous to sell. It was a warning and a promise, a preview of what the Mustang could become if Ford ever decided to prioritize performance over practicality. While the lawyers and executives buried the Mustero, its spirit lived on in every Shelby GT350, Boss 429, and Cobra Jet Mustang that followed. Those later cars were refined, balanced, and engineered, everything the Mustero wasn't. Yet in its raw, unfiltered madness, the 427 Experimental embodied the soul of American muscle. Bold, reckless, and utterly unforgettable. The Mustero was never meant to survive, but in its brief, fiery moment, it showed Ford what real power felt like and what it could cost. Number 4. By 1965, the Ford Fairlane 500 was a modest, mid-size sedan aimed squarely at America's middle class. It was practical, affordable, and simple, exactly what families needed. But deep inside Ford's performance division, engineers were restless. They were still riding the wave of success from the Thunderbird project of 1964, a Fairlane stuffed with a 427 cubic inch racing engine that terrified competitors on the drag strip. So, naturally, Ford decided to see what would happen if they built a street-friendly version of that same monster. The result? The 1965 Fairlane 500 lightweight sedan, an insane combination of grocery-getter and quarter-mile rocket. Ford engineers wanted to create a lighter, faster follow-up to the Thunderbolt, which had already proven nearly unbeatable in drag racing. Using a regular 1965 Fairlane 500 sedan body, they stripped out as much weight as possible. Aluminum bumpers, fiberglass hood and fenders, and even plexiglass windows on some test cars. The goal was simple: take Ford's racing power plant and make it work in a civilian shell. But it quickly became clear this was not a car for civilians. At the heart of the lightweight sedan was Ford's legendary 427 FE V8, the same engine powering NASCAR Galaxies and NHRA drag cars. This was no mild street motor. Even in its detuned state, it produced around 425 horsepower and over 480 pounds-feet of torque. In full race trim, it could easily exceed 500 horsepower. The engine was paired to a 4-speed top-loader manual transmission and a 4.11 rear axle, meant for sheer acceleration. The car could rocket down the quarter mile in the low 12-second range, a time utterly absurd for a mid-size sedan in 1965. However, the powertrain completely overwhelmed the Fairlane's suspension and chassis. The car was never designed for such brutal torque. It would twist, shudder, and lift its front wheels under full throttle. The steering was vague, and braking power was laughably inadequate for the speeds it could reach. Ford's engineers reportedly called it a drag racer that wanted to be a taxi, a joke that summed up its identity crisis perfectly. Even professional drivers had a tough time keeping the car straight. Without power steering or proper weight distribution, it was a handful at any speed. The combination of lightweight construction and a monstrous V8 made it unpredictable and unsafe for public roads. By 1965, U.S. regulators were beginning to take vehicle safety more seriously. The idea of selling a car with a 427 racing engine in a family sedan shell raised eyebrows not just among Ford executives, but also in legal departments. There were liability concerns, especially after reports of test mules suffering frame damage during hard acceleration runs. Ford's legal team quickly intervened, declaring the lightweight Fairlane unfit for production. Only a few test cars were reportedly built, each one slightly different, as Ford experimented with weight reduction methods and engine setups. None were ever sold to the public, though a few leaked into private hands through racing channels. While the 1965 Fairlane 500 lightweight sedan never reached showrooms, its DNA lived on in Ford's later Fairlane Thunderbolts and 427 powered racing projects. It demonstrated that Ford's mid-size platform could house big block performance, paving the way for later high-powered models like the Fairlane GTA, and even influencing the muscle car boom that followed. In a sense, the lightweight sedan was a mad experiment that pushed engineering boundaries too far for the time, a Frankenstein of speed that simply couldn't exist in a world of safety standards and everyday practicality. Today, the few surviving prototypes are coveted by collectors and historians as proof of Ford's wild 1960s engineering spirit, a time when too much power simply didn't exist, even if it probably should have. Number 3. In the early 1960s, Ford Motor Company faced a generational shift. Young drivers were no longer satisfied with conservative sedans. They wanted something small, fast, and exciting. The Falcon, introduced in 1960, was originally Ford's sensible compact car, meant for economy and practicality. But by 1963, a few engineers within Ford's Total Performance program saw potential beneath its plain sheet metal. Their vision was radical for the time. Take the lightweight Falcon body and give it a powerful V8 heart. This idea led to the 1964 Ford Falcon Sprint 289 prototype, a hidden gem of American automotive history, a street racer that was born just as the Mustang was waiting to steal its thunder. Before the Mustang existed, the Falcon was Ford's only small platform that could appeal to younger drivers. In 1963, the Falcon Sprint model debuted, a sportier trim with bucket seats, floor shifter, and a mild 260 cubic inch V8, producing around 164 horsepower. It was the first step in transforming the Falcon from mom's car into a genuine compact performance machine. But that wasn't enough for Ford's experimental engineers and performance-minded executives. In 1964, behind closed doors, they began testing a high-compression 289 V8 version, a full racing-style engine similar to the one soon to power the first-generation Mustang GT and Shelby Cobra. This secret Falcon was not for comfort, not for economy, but for raw performance. The prototype was fitted with Ford's 289 cubic inch small block V8, tuned for high performance with solid lifters, higher compression ratios, and a 4-barrel carburetor. Depending on the setup, it could produce up to 275 horsepower, a massive figure for a compact car of its size and weight. Mated to a close-ratio 4-speed manual transmission and limited-slip rear differential, the 289 Falcon could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 6.5 seconds, performance on par with early GTOs and Corvettes. Engineers loved its balance and agility. The car was over 400 pounds lighter than most mid-size muscle cars, giving it nimble handling and a thrilling power-to-weight ratio. It was in essence a factory-built street racer hiding behind a plain, conservative appearance. The stripped-down body, function over form. To make the car even faster, Ford's experimental team used a stripped-down Falcon body. Sound insulation, trim pieces, and even some interior comforts were removed to shed pounds. It had a simple bench or bucket seat interior, a basic dashboard, and minimal chrome, all in the name of performance. From the outside, it looked like any ordinary Falcon Sprint, a car your neighbor's father might drive. But under the hood, it was a whole different animal. That's what made it so special and so dangerous for Ford's marketing plans. Just as Ford engineers perfected the 289-powered Falcon, the company's marketing division unveiled a car that would change everything, the 1964.5 Ford Mustang. The Mustang was in reality built on the Falcon platform, sharing much of its chassis and mechanical components. But it was wrapped in sleek, aggressive styling, with a long hood, short deck, and endless customization options, exactly what young Americans wanted. The Mustang's instant success killed the 289 Falcon project overnight. Executives didn't want two cars competing in the same segment, and the Falcon's conservative image didn't fit the total performance campaign Ford was building around its new star. Thus, the Falcon Sprint 289 prototype was quietly shelved, a victim of corporate timing, not engineering failure. Although never officially sold, a handful of pre-production Falcons with 289 engines were built and tested internally. Some even made their way into private hands or regional racing circuits. In SCCA and drag racing events, these Falcons stunned competitors. Their lightweight and small size made them formidable. One Ford engineer reportedly said, "It was the Mustang before there was a Mustang. We just didn't know it yet." The prototype proved that Ford's compact platform could be thrilling, and it directly influenced the early Mustang GT mechanical setup. The DNA of the Falcon Sprint 289 lived on in nearly every performance-oriented small Ford that followed, from the 1965 Mustang GT to the later Fairlane and Torino muscle cars. Conclusion: the car that deserved a spotlight. The 1964 Ford Falcon Sprint 289 prototype was one of those almost legends. A car that had the speed, style, and potential to redefine Ford's performance image. Yet it was overshadowed by its younger, flashier sibling, the Mustang. Still, this prototype deserves recognition as the missing link between Ford's humble compact roots and the explosive rise of the American muscle car era. It was proof that great ideas don't always reach production, but they often shape the cars that do. Engine: 289 cubic inch high compression V8 4-barrel. Horsepower: 275 HP at 6,000 RPM. Torque: around 300 lb-ft. Transmission: 4-speed manual top loader. 0 to 60 miles per hour, around 6.5 seconds. Quarter mile, around 14.8 seconds. Top speed, around 120 miles per hour. Weight, approximately 2,700 pounds. Number 2. The late 1960s were the glory years of American muscle. Every major automaker was chasing horsepower and style, trying to outdo the others on the drag strip and showroom floor. Ford's lineup was already crowded with performance. The Mustang, Fairlane GT, and Galaxie 500 all carried the famous blue oval badge into battle. But in 1967, Ford's upscale division Mercury wanted its own performance hero, something that could rival the Mustang, yet feel more mature and luxurious. That car was the Mercury Cougar, a refined pony car built on the Mustang platform, but with added class, better interiors, and a smoother ride quality. However, Mercury engineers had a wild idea. What if the Cougar wasn't just a luxury pony car, but a full-blown muscle monster? That question led to the creation of a one-off legend, the 1967 Ford Cougar 427 prototype. A car so fast, so dangerous, and so unmanageable that Ford refused to ever sell it. The Mercury Cougar debuted in 1967 as Mercury's first pony car. It shared much of its chassis and running gear with the Mustang, but had unique styling: a hidden headlight front grille, elegant lines, and a quieter, more sophisticated cabin. While the Mustang catered to the youth market, the Cougar was targeted at young professionals who wanted power without teenage flash. It was the bridge between performance and luxury, marketed as the man's car that's all cat. Under the hood, the top-of-the-line Cougar GT came with Ford's 390 cubic inch V8, producing 320 horsepower, plenty fast for most drivers. But deep within Ford's Dearborn testing facilities, a secret experiment was underway to push the Cougar far beyond that limit. Enter the 427 cubic inch FEV8, the same engine that powered Ford's racing Fairlanes, Thunderbolts, and Le Mans-winning GT40s. This was no mild street motor. It was a purpose-built performance engine designed for NASCAR and drag racing, capable of 425 to 450 horsepower in factory tune and over 500 HP in race trim. The 427 was known for its enormous torque, lightweight internals, and aggressive personality. Installing it in a mid-size or full-size car was already borderline madness, but fitting it into a compact, short-wheelbase Cougar was pure insanity. Still, that didn't stop Ford's experimental engineers. They built several test mules in late 1966 and early 1967. 427-powered Cougars meant to test traction, balance, and structural integrity. One of those became the 1967 Ford Cougar 427 prototype. To fit the massive FE engine into the Cougar's engine bay, engineers had to modify the front subframe and upgrade the suspension. Heavy-duty shocks, stiffer springs, and larger brakes were installed. Even so, the car was nose-heavy, unpredictable, and nearly impossible to control under full throttle. Early test reports described brutal acceleration and violent wheel spin, with the rear tires struggling for traction even in third gear. The torque overwhelmed the chassis, twisting the body and unsettling the rear suspension. One Ford engineer reportedly described the prototype as a rocket with a steering wheel, but no aim. Despite the chaos, the car's raw numbers were impressive. 0 to 60 miles per hour, around 5.2 seconds. Quarter mile, roughly 13 seconds flat. Top speed, over 140 miles per hour. But those figures came at a cost: unstable handling, excessive heat, and drivetrain stress that made the car unsuitable for public roads. When Ford executives observed the prototype's performance at the Dearborn test track, reactions were mixed. The engineers were proud. The marketing team was terrified. Mercury was supposed to be Ford's refined performance brand, not a wild drag strip terror. The 427 engine made the Cougar feel more like a violent racer than a road car. Combined with its unpredictable handling, it completely contradicted Mercury's image of upscale sophistication. Additionally, the oil crisis of 1967, new emissions regulations, and insurance crackdowns on high-horsepower vehicles made executives extremely cautious. The idea of selling a 425-horsepower Cougar to the public was both risky and impractical. Thus, the Cougar 427 prototype never made it past the testing phase. The car was quietly mothballed, its data used for later high-performance projects like the Cougar XR7G and Cyclone Spoiler 2, which pursued power in a more controllable form. A glimpse of what could have been. If Ford had gone ahead with a production 427 Cougar, it would have been one of the most powerful pony cars ever built, easily eclipsing the 390 Mustang GT and even rivaling big block Camaros and Mopars. It could have rewritten the history of the Cougar, positioning it as a genuine muscle car legend rather than a luxury alternative. But in 1967, Mercury needed buyers, not lawsuits or bad press from wrecked prototypes. Ironically, just a few years later, Ford would embrace the luxury muscle concept with the 1970 Cougar Eliminator, offering a 428 Cobra Jet option. In a way, The spirit of the 427 prototype lived on, but in a more civilized, street-ready form. The 1967 Ford Cougar 427 prototype remains one of Ford's great what-if experiments, a glimpse into a parallel universe where Mercury unleashed its inner beast. It was the ultimate expression of late 1960s American ambition. Build it faster, louder, and more powerful than anyone dared to. But it also proved an important point. Not every engine belongs in every car. The 427 Cougar was too brutal for its refined platform, a muscle monster trapped in a tuxedo. Though it never reached showrooms, the legend of this prototype continues to fascinate collectors and historians as the Cougar that roared too loudly for its own good. Key specifications, prototype estimates. Engine, 427 cubic inch FeV8, side oiler. Horsepower, 425 to 450 HP. Torque, approximately 480 pounds-feet. Transmission, 4-speed, manual, top loader. 0 to 60 miles per hour, around 5.2 seconds. Quarter mile, approximately 13.0 at 110 miles per hour. Top speed, 140 plus miles per hour. Number 1. The late 1960s were a time of unchecked horsepower madness. Automakers were obsessed with one goal: to dominate both the drag strip and the boulevard. Every year brought larger engines, more torque, and more daring experiments in the name of performance. Ford Motor Company, fresh from its Le Mans triumph with the GT40, had the confidence and budget to push limits in every direction. Among its lesser-known creations from this era was the 1968 Ford XL Fastback 428 drag test car, a massive, full-size coupe that served as a test bed for Ford's most ambitious big-block V8 research. It wasn't built for the public. It was built to explore how far a luxury-bodied rocket could be pushed before physics and sanity said no more. In the process, the XL drag test car became one of the most terrifying and unstable vehicles ever to leave Ford's proving grounds, a reminder that raw power without balance can be as dangerous as it is thrilling. The Ford XL, full-size luxury meets late 1960s power culture. The Ford XL debuted in 1968 as the brand's top-tier performance luxury coupe, positioned above the Galaxie 500. Its sleek sports roof, fastback design, gave it an aerodynamic profile reminiscent of the Mustang, but stretched over a full-size chassis. It was the kind of car a successful executive might buy to blend comfort with muscle, long, low, and loaded with chrome. Standard engines included Ford's powerful 390 cubic inch V8, but true enthusiasts opted for the mighty 428 Cobra Jet, the same engine that would soon power drag strip legends like the Mustang CJ and Fairlane Thunderbolt. However, Ford engineers weren't satisfied with the street-tuned 428. They wanted to understand how its new torque curve behaved under extreme conditions, and for that, they needed a big, heavy, and stable test platform. On paper, the XL seemed like the perfect candidate. In reality, it nearly tore itself apart. The 428 Big Block, Ford's brutal powerhouse. Ford's 428 cubic inch FE engine was designed as a high-torque street and racing power plant, a big block that could move heavy cars with ease. By 1968, Ford was fine-tuning its combustion and camshaft design to produce a flatter torque curve, meaning massive power at low and mid-range RPMs. For testing, engineers installed a special high-output version of the 428, rumored to make over 430 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque, far beyond production specs. The engine featured a modified intake, higher compression pistons, experimental heads, and straight-through exhausts for unrestricted breathing. It wasn't about acceleration numbers. It was about studying torque behavior under full load, data that would later influence Ford's Cobra Jet and Super Cobra Jet developments. But the test mule they chose, the XL Fastback, turned out to be too soft, too big, and too unpredictable for such extreme testing. Trap testing, the full-size car that tried to fly. Ford's test drivers took the XL drag test car to the Dearborn Proving Grounds and later to a private drag strip facility. The first few runs were promising. The 4,200-pound car launched with startling ferocity, covering the quarter mile in the low 13-second range, astonishing for a vehicle of its size. But at higher speeds, problems appeared. Testers reported that the rear suspension squatted so violently under torque that the car's front end lifted, reducing steering control. At over 120 miles per hour, the steering went light and the massive hood began to vibrate dangerously. The car's front geometry wasn't designed for such torque loads, and the aerodynamics of the full-size body created lift rather than downforce. Essentially, the car wanted to take off like an airplane. On the third test pass, an engineer noted that the car became weightless past 130 miles per hour. Steering response nearly disappeared. After a few more controlled runs, the project was quietly halted. Ford's internal memo summarized it bluntly. Vehicle not suitable for consumer adaptation. Instability under full throttle acceleration unacceptable for public use. Lessons learned. The limits of muscle in a full-size chassis. Though the 1968 XL 428 drag test car never reached production, its brief life served an important purpose. Engineers learned critical lessons about weight distribution, suspension dynamics, and aerodynamics when applying extreme torque to non-racing platforms. The data from the XL project directly influenced the development of the 1968 428 Cobra Jet engine, which became more refined, manageable, and better suited for mid-size performance cars like the Mustang Mach 1 and Fairlane Cobra. In a sense, the XL sacrificed itself to make Ford's later muscle cars safer, more predictable, and ultimately more successful. Why it was never built for the public? Beyond safety, there were practical reasons Ford never put such a configuration into showrooms. The 428-powered XL would have been too heavy to handle competitively against mid-size rivals like the GTO or Chevelle SS. Too thirsty for daily driving in an era before fuel concerns, but with rising insurance scrutiny. Too expensive to market as a performance car. It was, after all, a full-size luxury coupe. The XL was meant to be a cruiser, not a cannonball. But Ford's experiments briefly blurred that line, and the results nearly launched a land yacht off the drag strip. Legacy, a forgotten giant with a purpose. Though only a few 428 XL test cars were ever built, and none survived in official records, their legend lives on in the stories told by Ford engineers and historians. The project embodied the no-limits attitude of late 1960s Detroit, when power came first and safety came much later. The 1968 Ford XL Fastback 428 drag test car stands as a monument to engineering ambition, proof that even brilliant minds can overshoot the limits of control. It was a 4,000-pound missile disguised as a luxury coupe, beautiful, brutal, and utterly unstable. Its story reminds us that in the golden age of muscle, sometimes the line between innovation and insanity was little more than a skid mark on the proving grounds. Model: 1968 Ford XL Fastback 428 drag test car. Engine: 428 cubic inch FE experimental high-output V8. Horsepower: approximately 430 horsepower. Torque: approximately 475 pound-feet of torque. Transmission, 4-speed, top-loader. 0 to 60 miles per hour, approximately 5.5 seconds. Quarter mile, approximately 13.2 seconds at 110 miles per hour. Top speed, approximately 135 to 140 miles per hour, unstable beyond this. Curb weight, approximately 4,200 pounds.